But every stream around here, every creek, every ditch, the water's going to the same place, Gulf of Mexico, seeking sea level. And sometimes I'll have people come to me though and say, I live next to the only river in the country that flows north. Well, rivers have no sense of direction. They just go downhill, you know, and lots of rivers do flow north in this country. You have a Red River, you know, there's a whole bunch of them I could do. The Tennessee, Cumberland, these are those flow directly up north. So it's not an anomaly to have a north flowing river. So it's an important part of a large waterway. It's also important for water itself, for a big portion of the state of Indiana, which makes cleaner water even more important. Fishing's good on this river, better than it used to be, with more variety than it used to be of fish. And I'll talk some more about that when I get into the wildlife. But it's a good place for fishing. And for a guy like me, it's a great place for exploration. That's what I do. And what's great about the Wabash is, for exploration is, once you get away from the towns, you don't have to go very far before this river appears to be a very remote place. It has a corridor of trees, even through agricultural areas. It gives you the feeling of remoteness, even if it's not remote so much. But so it looks like it did 300 years ago in its natural state. That's one of the great things about the Wabash River is you have so much of it, over 400 miles of it free flowing down here, and it's a very natural river. It's great for exploring. And it's also great for recreation. You know, there are people who will travel great distances to find a beach and some clean water to enjoy their time out. We've got it right here on the Wabash River. This picture was taken at a little beach just above Tecumseh, not far from here. In fact, that was a wedding reception on the river. So anyway, there's a lot to this river that most people aren't aware of. I want to take a few minutes to dedicate this story next to my good friend, the late Dennis May. Dennis passed away last December. And Dennis and I had a lot of great river adventures together. And some of them ended well, some did not swim so well, but they were still adventures nonetheless. But Dennis, I first met Dennis back in the early 90s. And he called me, and he'd heard that I had been traveling the Wabash and had written some journals and made some maps of the river. And he was planning a river trip. He loved the Wabash River too. And he was planning a river trip. He wanted to travel the entire length of the Wabash River in a powerboat, of all things. And I said, wow, powerboat? He said, well, he wanted to contact me for, would you loan me your maps and your charts, those things, and your journals to plan this trip? And I said, sure, I've loaned them out to everybody. So we got together, got to talk about this trip. And he had bought aluminum jet boat, 16-foot aluminum jet boat. And he wanted to put it in at the beginning and go to the end. And it's pretty tough up there in those headwaters for anything but a canoe. And anyway, we talked for a while about, I kind of got excited about the notion, and he invited me to go. I wondered if I would go with him. Him and Percy Mossberger, another fellow. And then the fourth gentleman, Rod O'Kelly, would drive a truck and follow us. So this was getting all planned out. So I knew that one thing we had to do was to look for the water level. And so I traveled by car to Fort Recovery, Ohio, checked it out, looked at the stages, measured, and I found a man in Jay County, Indiana, who lived near a bridge. And I said, now I'm going to mark this bridge with 2 marks. When that level reaches between these 2 marks, would you call me? That's where we need to go. And he said he would do that. Because any lower, the boat wouldn't float. Any higher, we wouldn't get under the bridges. There's low bridges up in the headwaters. And so he agreed to do that. Well, we started making the plans, getting the gear together, and got the phone call. He said, it's there, it's between those 2. I said, is it rising or falling? He didn't know that. I didn't know that. He didn't know that. That's kind of important to know. So we set off to Fort Recovery. We got the gear, we took that boat, we went to Fort Recovery to launch that boat. Now, this is the boat. It has a jet drive. Now, jet drive doesn't mean it has a jet engine. That means it has an impeller instead of a propeller. And it draws water in the hull and throws it out the back. That's what propels it, like a jet ski. And so it makes it shallow running. You run in shallow water without tearing your prop up. And so, Dennis had this rig made here for a shield for us, and it has a canvas cover that goes over the top, and for bad weather, which was great because we had plenty of that, bad weather. And we launched that boat right there near Fort Recovery in this very shallow, small river. And it didn't take long. Oh, by the way, there's a sign here, you can't read it very well, but it says, Ohio River or bust. Turns out we did both. We busted the boat, but we made it to the Ohio River, as the story goes. But anyway, we launched that boat, and it didn't take long. We were walking that boat. We were pulling it. We were winching. We were dragging that boat through those very shallow areas. And finally, we could go no farther. And Rod O'Kelly, who had the truck, we had radio contact with, he finally drove the truck down the river to get to us to put that boat on a trailer and take it around that shallow area. So we had to do some portaging, as it turned out, with a 2,000-pound boat. And it's pretty easy to canoe with your canoe to portage, but that's a little hard to portage. But we did. Now the next big challenge we had was this. That's the Wabash River, the rapids. That's in Markle, Indiana. And I knew that was coming. I canoed through there, did okay. But taking that boat through there was pretty risky. To take anything, a large boat through that area. And that rapids comes about because at one time at Markle, Indiana, the Corps of Engineers built a big levee around the town to protect it from flooding. But they also wanted the river to continue to flow through it, so they had a control gate to allow only a certain amount of water to flow past the city. And then they built a bypass channel around for all excess water. Well, this is the bypass channel that you have to take. You can't go through this way, there are gates to go through. But this is where they join back together. And where they come back together, it's rapid, it's fast water. It drops off about 4 to 6 feet into a falls there. And so, very bad place. Knew it would be bad. So what my plan was, we went through there, and I was the navigator. That was my job. But to come through there and stay over to the left and take this chute right over here. And that would be the simplest way to get into there, keeping that boat straight. Well, the river had other plans for us. Like that shoal running across there. We came into that hard, we went sideways. Don't want to go sideways in rapids. We got sideways of that shoal and came to a stop in that shoal. That was a good thing, really, because we went sideways. If we went down that sideways, we would have rolled over. So it stopped us dead in our tracks. We were stuck in those rocks and didn't know what to do. We tried everything to get that boat loose. Compounding the problem was we knocked a hole in the boat. And it sat there and boom, 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 boom. It was sitting on the bottom. Now the boat has flotation, it's not going to sink completely, but it's certainly swamp, but it makes it even heavier. So we were hooking straps, trying to get that thing off there. This is Dennis out here running out there with a winch, and that's Percy getting another strap. We kept snapping off strap. One strap broke and hit me and knocked me into the water. It hurt. It didn't injury, but it hurt. So we tried and tried, nothing was working. It's funny because we were exhausted, we were wet, it was raining. And Dennis leaned on his boat and he looked at me and he said, "Jerry, we're going to get out of this." I said, "Well, sure, Dennis." I said, "You're a smart guy, you'll think of something." Well, apparently that inspired him because he did think of something else. He got a little rod on the truck. Said, "Unhook that trailer, bring that truck down that levee. We're going to hook that truck on there. We're going to drag this boat up." Because over along the bank, it was deep water right through there. Just shallow out here where we're stuck. It's deep water. So he drove that truck on that levee and then got pointed down the other side of it. We hooked our cables, lines, everything we had in that boat. Now, we couldn't hook to anything on the boat without pulling it apart, with that much power. So we actually wrapped a strap around the hull of the boat to drag it with. And so we could hear they got that all hooked up and it's time to go. We all stood back at the in the water. And that power, it was a 4-wheel drive truck, big truck, and he went down the hill on the other side, dragging that thing down, and it broke loose. It broke loose. Took a lot of power, a lot of noise going on. It broke loose and finally dragged it over. Now, what we had to do was, since it got over in deep water, is unhook it quickly while it was still floating. So Dennis could start it up and drive it to the boat ramp 3 miles upstream that we passed. So as soon as we got over there, well, Rod didn't know exactly if he got there yet. He was hitting the bank with it, trying to drive, keep on driving. Finally got word to him to stop, pull some slack in that line, got it in the hook. Dennis jumped in the boat, and he took off, heading upstream. Now, we quickly as we could, got in the truck, the rest of us, got the trailer on, and met him at the boat ramp. When we got there, he was already there. He beat us there. He was out there running in circles. Why is that? Keep the water out of the boat. If he kept on going, he would draw the water out of the hole. If he stopped, it would sink. So he was running in circles. And it was raining, it was windy, the water was swift, and he was out there running in circles, waiting for us to get the trailer in. We got it finally in, backed up in there, and I was amazed at his skill, because he came around fast against that wind and current and all they had worked with him, and came in and just perfectly slid that boat right from that trailer. Came just beautifully. And we hooked on very quickly and pulled it out of the water to inspect the damage. Sure enough, there's a hole there. Well, we trailered it into Huntington, Indiana, and found us somebody who could weld it, a welding shop. And they pounded it, and they welded a heliarc, a patch of aluminum over that hole. Fixed the hole, on we go. We were on to the next part of that journey.